Hello, Jens.
Hello.
Hello. We hope you can hear us. We can hear each other. So happy to be here another Saturday night. Before we begin, let us tell you about our week. How you doing, John? You hanging in there?
I'm,
Feeling better?
I'm slowly getting my voice back. So
Good.
it's yeah. So I'm here. I
John,
wasn't sure.
yeah, we've had quite the week. First, John's parents were really sick, were their caretakers. Ended up taking my mother-in-law to the ER Monday, and then John got really sick. And he had his book club. Thank you to those that showed up for the book club on Patreon. Patreon.com/hiddentrue on Wednesday night. It was your monthly book club. And although you were sick and I said, we can reschedule, you said, no, I'm going to do this. And so you got on there, and thank you to those that were on there. And then after that, you just got really sick. I was sleeping on the couch to not get sick. So far, so good. Anyway, with everything going on this week, we had plans to delve deep into Ruby Franke, just like we did with Jodi. Well, I think most of you know that a hidden true crime is different in that we deep dive for every hidden hour. We don't come here half prepared. So we did not feel fully ready for a full Ruby Franke deep dive, but we have a great show ready for you tonight. We have a lot to talk about when it comes to Jodi Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke, some tea. I want to tell you about my visit to St. George and to Jodi's house and to some people I talked about. And we're going to bring you all the latest. And we printed out right here some really great comments and questions from our YouTube comments from last week. Thank you for all of your kind comments and thoughts. Oh, and that.
Yeah. I received this. I received this last night thanks to Amazon. This is Jodi's book. So we'll be talking a little bit about her book as well. Her book, by the way, the title is "You Are Not Enough." So I'm particularly
We've had a lot of fun with this title in our house.
Yeah, I love the double negative. I think that's a real hit. That's a real crowd pleaser when you use a double negative. And in fact, I almost wrote to Oprah and said you should change the title of your book to "You Are Not Your Best Self" or whatever I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know Oprah's books that well, but it seemed to me like this was catchy enough that I think a lot of people should start changing their book titles.
Yeah, I've got the body doesn't keep the score, or
right,
the sociopath not next door. Just to throw. So Jodi's book is "You Are Not Enough." So
yeah, it sounds like a jingle. It sounds like it should be a jingle.
You are not enough. It's you are not enough.
Yeah.
You are what you eat. You are what you don't donate.
You are not what you eat.
Something interesting about the book. I actually read it this Saturday. It's amazing. You can't get me to read a lot of things, but I've read every Chad Daybell book, and I've read Jodi Hildebrandt's book, and I've read Melanie Gibbs' book, and I've read Adam Cox's book. I guess that's my thing. But I read the book this morning. Flip it around. I want to show something that's really interesting. I want to show you who wrote a recommend for her book. It's at the very bottom. Well, why don't you read it? Okay, Hiram Smith. I'm going to tell you who that is. Hiram Smith is Debbie. Thank you. We love it when Debbie shows up. You are so kind and generous. We love you, Debbie. Thank you. So Hiram Smith is the co-founder of Franklin Covey and was the CEO. Does anybody know who Franklin Covey is? If you don't, let's think of it this way. Who used a Franklin planner in the 1990s? I mean, those were all the rage, right? I remember smelling my new leather.
I did.
You did too?
I did, yeah.
Cool. I feel so connected to you. Yeah, I was in high school. I was a little young. You were probably in college, like using yours. But so he is the co-founder, Hiram Smith, of Franklin Covey, who sold Franklin planners. And the other co-founder was Stephen Covey. So Stephen Covey is the New York Times bestselling author, the late Stephen Covey. He died after a cycling accident. he is the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So that's a book I haven't read. I'll read Daybell, but reading something about being effective makes me anxious.
I read the Covey book, The 7 Habits, by the way. I mean, it was so popular, but was it the 90s? 90s? I did read it. I do have to report, though, it didn't make me more effective. So I felt like the reading the book, I mean, it wasn't a total loss, but.
Well, Kathleen's telling us this is a dreadful book. So I'm gonna go with Kathleen since I haven't read it. Late 80s. So anyway, Stephen Covey and Hiram Smith co-founded the day planner. I mean, they didn't co-found the day planner industry, but it took Franklin planners took the day planner industry by storm, completely changed the entire, what am I trying to say, industry until cell phones came along, and now we don't use them as much. But Hiram Smith's a big deal. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. He's a very big deal. I was a TV reporter in St. George, Utah. This is where the children were found. John and I actually lived 10 minutes from where the children were found. This is another reason we're so passionate about this case. So Hiram Smith is a prominent figure in Southern Utah.
He's deceased.
No. Hiram Smith is not. Stephen Covey is.
No, Hiram Smith is deceased too, 2019.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not do my research on him, but I saw that and I didn't even check. So he was there and then we moved. I did not know that. Okay. Yeah. Well, he also started a boys ranch in St. George, Utah. So he had a therapy ranch for troubled boys. So I have a lot of questions about that. I was hoping to call him next week. I guess that's not happening. But anyway, what did he say about not enough, about the not enough book?
Yeah. I feel like maybe there should be another not in there. You are not enough. I don't know.
Well, I did 3. Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Anyway, he wrote. So interestingly enough, so this is somebody who's quite prominent in the community and in the Mormon community as well, right?
And in the St. George community, Southern Utah.
St. George.
I would go to ribbon cuttings where he'd be the main speaker, opening up the hospital, speaking with politicians.
So he's the only one. He is the only person who wrote a review for the cover. So that's of interest, right? And so here's what he says. Anyone looking for more peace in their successful, busy life, or those experiencing pain, fear, loneliness, disconnection, or any other peace-destroying thought pattern must read You Are Not Enough. So it is interesting that there's no other reviewers but Hiram Smith. And another interesting thing about this book is it has no references. It has no citations. So in other words, if I were to write a book, I'm working on a book. I've been working on a book forever. In my book, there's going to be all kinds of, as I'm sure our listeners would expect, I'm going to have all kinds of citations and references and to other books and research. But in Jodi Hildebrandt's book, there's not a single. She actually starts the book with a couple of references to footnotes, but then she doesn't include the citations. So I guess it's a little bit of a teaser that she doesn't follow through on. So, but anyway, that's interesting. So Hiram Smith is really kind of the only reference and person who supports or provides a review of this book.
Okay. Well, thank you. I feel kind of bad that I was going to, like I said, I would wonder what he would say today with that review. Unfortunately, we can't call him. So thank you. That is sad that's sad.
Yeah.
He asked and I didn't realize it. Thanks for letting me know. It has been recommended that Ruby have a pre-trial release still, meaning despite her being charged, she can be released into the public before the trial and hang out. And they have recommended her in that public safety assessment. Jodi has not had a public safety assessment, but Ruby has, and it has been recommended in that a pre-trial release. So if she gets bail, she could be out Monday. So it's something to look for. And I just have to stop for a second and think, Gina, this means so much Thank you so much to both of you. This is for all the times I've benefited from your hard work and didn't know how to send support. Oh, and then I read the last thing. Gina, I'm so sorry. Did you read that? I didn't read it.
Yeah,
apologies.
I didn't know that was coming.
I will edit that after. Thank you. So that's coming up Monday, and that's really important. We'll see what happens. All right. Anything else you want to discuss, John, before?
No, I think you.
Questions. I want to start with this comment that someone left on our page about this auction that Ruby was a part of. We picked out, John and I last night picked out 4 or 5 comments and questions. Thank you for always leaving your YouTube comments. We do go through them, and these are the 4 we want to discuss from our gems. Anything you want to say before that? Anything about the book, or should we just jump in?
No, the book will come after some of these comments. I think we need to leave some time.
Not enough will play a part throughout the whole. You are not enough is here for the whole thing. All right. Thanks, Ozzy. All right. This is by Small Fairy Tale. They write, here is a small piece of the puzzle. Ruby donated a large amount of money to a private school for her kids that her kids went to. This provided cover for her. American Heritage is a religious affiliated church. She says it's Mormon church affiliated. I don't know if they own it, but I do know a lot of LDS people. Maybe they do. I'll look into that. A lot of LDS people, students can attend there. My daughter, she would know. Okay. American Heritage is a Mormon church affiliated school. My daughter went there. At a 2018 charity auction, they were in the top tier of donations and meaning the Ruby Franke's were. And the Franke's had a special table reserved for them. And they were praised several times by the principal, and we were encouraged to watch their channel. There is a lot of power at the school. CEOs were there, usually an apostle or 2, community leaders. It would take a significant amount of money to get this praise, as auction items that night went for as close as $80,000, well over their value. When I saw the report that many times police were called to the home and then child services could not get a search warrant, I thought of the power that Ruby gained that night. That's an interesting bit of tea. Thank you, Small Fairy Tales. Thoughts, John?
Just that, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense that there's a political element to this scenario. In fact, when this crime first broke, I told, what is it I told you? Do you remember?
The first thing John told me, and I actually shut him down. I was like, don't say that. No. He said, I don't know if they're going to do a lot of time. I don't know if justice is going to be served for these children. Knowing Utah, knowing the system, I'm really concerned. That was the first thing John said to me.
I think if the world wasn't looking at this scenario or this crime or this alleged crime, I wouldn't be surprised if they would have been released by now. And this insight is part of the reason why that would be true. You know, and that's not to say that I'm sure other states are highly political, and, you know, I mean, this is all intertwined with politics and right. And the judicial system and money. And I mean, so I'm not pointing the finger at Utah, but I think sometimes in small communities that influence is maybe easier to obtain. So, but I don't know. We'll see.
We'll throw that in with the fact that, you know, again, I know he's passed away now, but throw in the fact that Jodi was supported by someone like Hiram Smith, you know, Franklin Covey.
Right.
You know, both of these women, in other words, had some serious connections without an X.
She was able to get probably one of the most prominent members of that community, certainly one of the wealthiest and most influential members of that community, to write the only review for her book. So, you know, so clearly there's a political dimension to this scenario. So we'll see.
Right. And just to be able to say, to the, we're going to a therapist. We have a therapist, and then that position of power that Jodi had. Well, she was a licensed therapist, and that said something, unfortunately, which is why you were so upset last week. It's so egregious to use that position of power.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, so we haven't confirmed this, but I don't know if I shouldn't mention this. Okay.
No, I don't know what you're going to say. I'm like, when you start with, I haven't confirmed this, I'm like, oh.
I was going to talk about one of our sources gave us some inside information on the extent of the injuries. And
I think you can say that.
So we learned that, and we haven't confirmed this, but we've heard
from very close sources,
from sources very close to this situation, that some of the injuries to RF, I won't say the name, but some of the injuries to RF, who's the 12-year-old who escaped, that we heard that some of the injuries were bone deep. That the restraints and the duct tape had cut to the bone. That's serious. That's serious child abuse. That is not the sort of thing that typically I would expect someone to be released on probation for. But again, if that's true, if those injuries were that severe, I can't imagine that somebody would get released as soon as Monday, but I don't know. Well, we'll keep our eyes on it.
If you put that bit of information with the 911 call that we've all listened to, where the neighbor who's let this boy in and he's calling 911 and he's staying calm, and there's this moment where you can tell the neighbor breaks down, I can just imagine him what RF looked like. He turns to him. I mean, think about it, like those tears, he's talking to 911. He couldn't keep his composure. He just sort of broke down. And I just picture, in my mind, I picture a gentleman calling 911, staying calm, looking at RF, seeing his condition, and just, I think that's where the tears came.
Right. That if you have an injury where bones are showing, that's typically not a good sign. That's a pretty serious injury. So,
to say the least,
we're not talking about just some residual from the duct tape left, some sticky part of the duct tape left on the ankles. We're talking about something much more severe.
RF and EF are going to be so damaged emotionally. We agree, Shelley, and let's hope they get some proper help. It broke our heart to hear when the Turpin children were rescued, and to later learn that they were put into homes where the foster homes also abused them, was just beyond us. So let's hope that with what they've gone through, they will be able to have the help they need. All right. Anything else to that, John?
Nope. Did you want to bring up as long as we're talking about some of our sources, did you want to bring up the cellmate?
Oh yeah. Interesting information, right? Who doesn't love a jailhouse snitch? That came out yesterday, right? I mean, that's like my favorite thing in true crime, when we've got a jailhouse snitch. I'm like, tell me more. Drink. Yeah. You take a sip of that iced tea right there.
It's lemonade. Lemonade.
Oh, lemonade. Can we say it's tea tonight?
Okay. True. This is the one night I should have had tea.
Right.
I had tea during my book club Wednesday night, so let's just say it's tea.
Yeah. So anyway, big fan of jailhouse snitches, and thank you, Glenn. Thank you. Before I tell you, we talk jailhouse snitches, I just want to read what Glenn F said. This means a lot. You showing such real emotion last week, Dr. John, at someone in your professional harming such vulnerable people really got to me. Thank you so much for your compassion.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Glenn F. I'm passionate about the mental health field, and yeah, it really upsets me when people run amok in our field and they harm people, obviously, because that's not why we're here. We don't do this to harm people or to ruin families or ruin marriages. So So yeah, thank you. It is a passion of mine, and I'm always a bit upset when mental health professionals harm their clients and therefore harm our profession and harm our reputations, all of us in some ways. Um, so yeah, it's maddening. It's maddening what she's done.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. He truly is so passionate. Someone in comments wrote, "Oh, John's Venus flytrap is coming out." I'm like, "Oh, his Venus flytrap is real. He doesn't show it always, but John certainly has a Venus flytrap in him when he's passionate about something." Lori, love jailhouse snitches. So do I. Well, you're in good company. So let's talk about that really quickly. We had someone come out that was housed with Jodi, and then after being and she didn't know this woman was arrested in St. George for petty theft. And she asked Jodi that night what she had been arrested for. And Jodi said, "I don't want to talk about it." And she said, "Okay," and I wish I could pull up then after Jodi left, this woman was then housed with Ruby. I mean, could you not get back? Oh my gosh, this woman is her name Deborah? Here we go. I'll read. Deborah Monson told Insider. Okay. So this is what she said. I do want to ask you some questions, John, about your thoughts on this. Monson was arrested August 31st on petty theft. And then she spent around an hour with Hildebrandt at the start of her stay in Purgatory Correctional Facilities. John has done many assessments at Purgatory. I have done many reports at Purgatory, followed by 3 nights with Franke in the medical area. As of Thursday, they're still being listed in jail. Trying to come on, ads. Monson said she had no idea who they were at the time, and only realized after she left and her family was talking about them on the drive home. She described both Franke and Hildebrandt as, in quotes, really tight-lipped, but said she had a lot of time to observe how Franke behaved. Most notably, Franke seemed distressed that she and Hildebrandt had been separated. She said, in quotes, "Gosh, how long are they going to keep us in here? And why did they separate me and Jodi?" Monson said. Franke said, "I can't understand why they separated me and my friend. Monson said Franke was interested after she let her know that she was briefly held alongside Hildebrandt. She said, "Oh, what did she say? How did she act? Did she say anything at all?" And she described Franke as almost childlike in her manner and almost smitten. Smitten is a quote. They used it in the headline. Smitten with Hildebrandt. Monson told Franke that Hildebrandt seemed pretty distraught and didn't want to talk about anything. Jodi had obviously been crying a lot, Monson said of her time with Hildebrandt. Her eyes were really red and swollen and kind of squinted. You could hardly see her eyes, and she looked very distressed. She said she asked Hildebrandt why she was in jail, and Hildebrandt looked at her with not a smile, not a frown, but a straight face and said, in quotes, "I would rather not say." I said, "Okay, I apologize. I wasn't trying to invade your privacy," Monson said, and that was everything that was said between us. Monson said Franke reacted to her account by saying, "That's what I thought that she would be like." Monson said Franke also played mother hen to another woman in their cell, who Franke believed was going through drug withdrawal. Franke was tucking the blankets under her and mothering her, nurturing her, Monson said. Franke also carried a Bible with her a lot of the time. She kept holding it to her chest, and she closed her eyes, Monson said. At one point, Monson said she saw Franke crying. When she asked her what was wrong, Franke said, "I just miss my kids." Monson said she doubted Franke's sincerity, though, saying her emotions seemed to have no depth, and she seemed completely narcissistic. I just wanted to read that. I do not know your thoughts about that, John. I don't even know if you've read the whole article, but I'm really curious your thoughts about. Thank you, Deborah, by the way. Thank you, Deborah Monson. Deborah Monson, if you're watching, write us at hiddentruecrimeinfo@gmail.com. We want to thank you for being a jailhouse snitch. Thoughts?
I mean, I think she assesses the situation well. I think that the smitten part is really compelling. I think that, you know, that Ruby probably is smitten in the same way that Lori Daybell was smitten with Chad. I think there is. We'll talk about this a bit later, but I think there is definitely potentially a romantic component there. So there seems to be. So that might indicate that the smitten part, kind of the fawning, right? The fawning partner that's missing her, but I think also another part of that is that there's some desperation there. She's desperate to get on the same page with Jodi. Obviously, Ruby and Jodi haven't really thought through the criminal process very well. They don't understand that it's pretty common practice. I hope it is in purgatory too, but common practice in most jails to separate co-defendants, and so they can't talk and get their story straight. So I'm quite sure they're going to do that. But I think there was some desperation here with Ruby wanting to see Jodi so they can get on the same page. My guess is they probably already interrogated both of them. They're probably told very different stories, so that'll be interesting. But I think that's what I sense the most. I think that on the one hand, Ruby misses her. She wants to see her just because potentially there's some type of romantic partnership there. And secondly, she's anxious and she's somewhat desperate to try to get on the same page with Jodi about what happened and what their story is going to be so that they can solidify that and work together. I don't think she's ever been, you know, they're business partners. They live together. I don't think she's been separated from Jodi at all for probably a year, maybe more than that, maybe a year and a half. So I think there's a bit of panic here on Ruby's part with the separation. She can't see her. She can't talk to her. And if this is a cult type situation, then the other component is there's dependency. That Ruby feels very dependent on Jodi and needs to see her the way a child would need to see a parent. So I think you have that element too. So I think this is a really interesting story for many reasons, because it shows their possible dynamic and it shows their emotional, you know, their state of mind and their emotions in jail.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Babe. Thanks for tuning in on that. I was really wondering. In fact, I started to ask you earlier today and I said, wait, nope, save it. I'll ask you live.
You'll ask me live, yeah.
I thought this was interesting. This is Daybell meets Turpin. I so hope the children are placed in safe homes right now. Can't agree more. Amy, I agree that this is what this is.
Yeah, that's great. If they want to do like a pitch for a documentary, that's how to pitch it. Daybell meets Turpin. that's
a little teaser for things to come later in this live, because I'm seeing a lot of things and I want you to know it's on the agenda. A lot of people are mentioning the possibility of a romantic relationship with Jodi and Ruby. And so I'm going to tell you guys that is coming. So stay tuned. We're going to go through a couple other comments first, but yes, we have plans to talk about all of your comments and questions when it comes to that, because in my opinion, it is the elephant in the room and it's not necessarily something the news can cover because it's speculation and not really their wheelhouse. But a hidden true crime, we have a psychologist with us, so we're gonna delve deep into that speculation a bit. In just a minute.
A psychologist who can only speculate so much, but I mean,
yes,
a little speculation, not too much though. So
yeah, right.
We'll see what we can do. I feel comfortable enough with the information we have to discuss it. To discuss it, right? So if I felt like there was no basis for this claim, then we wouldn't talk about it. But I think there's enough that we know. I feel comfortable that we can. It's still speculation, but I think it's speculation with some evidence. So
yes, KH, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for the kindness tonight. And I'm shocked to see that there are 4,500 people watching right now. Honored too. If everybody that appreciates this could subscribe and to like this video. It's the greatest support you could also give. So thank you everyone for your support tonight. I want to touch on this and then we'll read the next comment. The similarities to Lori Daybell and Chad Daybell are eerie. This will happen again, given the right or wrong set of circumstances. Nothing seems to have changed in the falsity to protect the vulnerable. And I just want to reiterate one more thing again. I'm digging deep, and we've covered Daybell for 3-4 years. I have dug deep into everyone involved. 3.5 years, I guess. It's coming on 4 years. It's crazy. It's wild. I want to reiterate again. I've talked a lot when it comes to Daybell case. We've talked a lot about the book Visions of Glory and how that affected Chad Daybell and Lori Ballow's beliefs. The Preparing a People conferences that gave Chad a platform. Tom Harris and Spencer in the Visions of Glory book. And one thing that really concerns me is how they teach visions and dreams. And I'm getting very, very concerned about this group because Jodi Hildebrandt, that video we were playing last week, she was speaking at the Eternal Core Conference, which is done by Tom Harrison, the one who had the near-death experiences and visions of glory that many of these people consider scripture. I mean, it's all too intertwined. It is so similar. And these are people that they're mingling together. So I can't help but now see a pattern. It's one thing to have, the Daybell case was a never, like what in the world? Now that we're seeing 2 cases of abuse of children. I mean, it was more than abuse with JJ and Tylee, but it could have been more with R and E too. But I'm getting very, very concerned. Once you start to see a pattern, there's a serious problem, and agree. So we're keeping an eye on this. This case is, I don't want to see this again. Okay, next question. This is from Jay Pipes. Oh, go ahead, John. Did you want to say something?
Do you think we have time to get to this part? Do you want to skip this, or do you think? Okay, let's go through it quickly.
We'll go quickly, and then we'll get to my teaser.
Okay.
Because you're right. This is a whole other.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot to cover.
A little bit of a tangent.
Well, I think it's a tangent that needs to be discussed because of this last week, the issue of Kevin Franke. How is Kevin not being prosecuted too? Seriously, he was well aware and appears on camera trying to explain away his poor parenting and how he stayed silent during the custody hearing. That's prime evidence of being complicit. Thoughts? The attorney did interviews this last week saying he had nothing to do with this.
Yeah. The attorney argued that essentially Kevin is isolated up north. So I'm glad we talked about the geographical split earlier, because the attorney basically argued that Kevin is up north in northern Utah. And for the most part, Ruby is in southern Utah where the kids are, and he doesn't really interact with the kids or communicate with the kids. So the attorney essentially said Kevin's a great guy. He's done nothing wrong. He never participated in abuse. Even when CPS came to the house, nothing was ever substantiated. The argument is that Kevin's a stand-up guy. He didn't know anything. This was all Ruby. I think that's obviously it's his attorney. He's going to present the best case he can for Kevin. But my thoughts are, based on what we know of 8 Passengers and the show they did together, that clearly he knew about. I'm sure he knew about some abuse. I don't know about since Jodi came into the picture, but
there was strict obedience in the house.
Yeah, let's not call it abuse. Let's call it strict disciplinary measures. How about that? Because whether it rose to the level of abuse, I don't know. Obviously, apparently YouTube thought it did, but
I think it did. But when you say that, like as far as the law goes, too.
Yeah, as far as the law goes,
as far as the law goes.
As far as Child Protective Services goes, you could argue that. But then we read that bit of tea about them participating in an auction and giving hundreds of thousands of dollars. to a school that has huge influence, political influence, right? Like, so, was CPS in any hurry to really investigate them? They were famous. They had a lot of money. Their kids went to the best schools. They had political clout. They had political influence. I don't know, right? This is all kind of intertwined. So do I think that Kevin knew more than his lawyer's saying? Absolutely. Would there be sufficient evidence to charge him with something? That doesn't seem to be the case. But it is interesting that the lawyer did acknowledge that Ruby called Kevin right away. Apparently Ruby was tipped off that the police were coming, and she tried to intervene. So her first call was to Kevin, apparently, or she had some contact with Kevin and essentially asked him. I guess she thought he would drive down south, which would have taken hours, but she wanted him to help. That doesn't indicate that he's complicit, but I don't know. It's not clear cut here for sure. And actually, you found something interesting on Kevin. I think we should read some of these. You found a set of reviews. There's a
Rate My Professor.
Yeah, there's a website. There's a website where you can rate
Franke pre-arrest. We're talking
pre-arrest. Pre-arrest, right? So some of these are fascinating. So I think in trying to look at this situation, I think sometimes students can be biased, especially if you give them bad grades or you have confrontations with them or if they're not performing well. But so, you're going to always expect a couple of reviews that aren't going to be the greatest. But in this case, you're looking at a lot of reviews that aren't the greatest. So do you want to share some of those?
Yeah, let me share some of them. Hold on. All right. So I printed them out here. This one I want to read first. This is interesting. This is July 21st, 2022. And it's actually now been deleted as far as I can tell, but I snagged it before. Very strange man. If you don't agree with Professor Franke once, you are looked past for the remainder of the course. Now, if you've taken a few of his summer courses, he is trying to get you to get involved with Jodi Hildebrandt, who was renounced as a terrible person at BYU and the LDS Church, and who has severe untreated mental illness. Terrible, terrible people. That one is extra interesting. I just want to throw that out because this is, again, 2022, July. So a year and 2 months ago. And this alleged student is bringing up Jodi Hildebrandt.
Right. That's very interesting in the sense that the student would have no reason to bring up Jodi Hildebrandt and knows their connection. So.
Right. And I went today to rate my professor. These are the ones I pulled. September 1st, 2022. I truly did not have a great experience in his class. It was an insanely hard class. I take schoolwork very seriously, and I've never had an issue with a professor until now. Hard professors are one thing, but downright rude, dismissive, and arrogant is another. Save yourself the misery and take a class with someone else. This is July 2022. He was very rude and mean. He spoke down to his students in a disrespectful manner. July 23rd, 2022. I'm unable to get in contact outside of class. He is very controlling, and you can only have the same views that he has, or you will be looked down upon. He caused me so much stress that I dropped out. Professor Franke, this is June 24th, 2022. Professor Franke was rude from day one. He does not respect his students. He was always in a bad mood, make class miserable. He would make horrible homophobic remarks and make us students feel incompetent. His classroom felt hostile and like a prison. June 16th, Kevin is horrible. I cried every day. He's very abusive. This is the word abusive to his students. And we were left traumatized. He had a meltdown last month in front of the class and scolded everyone. I tried to contact the dean, but nothing happened. He screamed and yelled at us for using TikTok and went on a rant. He threw a textbook at me. I'm filing battery charges. He once pulled me by the arm into his office, and he yelled at me for doing a TikTok dance outside the building. He took 10 points off my grade because he saw me doing a TikTok dance outside of class. He said I broke the honor code and was promoting a word I can't say. We've been demoted recently. PORN. I was only doing the Rolex dance. He pushes his political agenda too much and talks about his kids. It's odd, ironic, more than the topic of classes. And I have to say, this is interesting. I'm reading all this because we've also spoke to we've spoke to many people that were in Jodi Hildebrandt's connections course, and multiple people that were in there with Ruby. And they do all say what the attorney sort of stated, that she separates the males and the females. This is consistent. And even Adam Steed went through this. And that she believes you have to completely disconnect before you reconnect. We spoke to one person who they had to completely separate, live separate places, the husband and the wife. And then when they got back together in the house, they had permission. They had to stay in separate bedrooms first. It was like inch by inch. I mean, so when I heard the attorney, I was like, well, yeah, I mean, what he's saying is kind of what we've heard, that he couldn't see Ruby. Jodi had control over her. He had no idea what was going on. He couldn't see the kids because clearly he's under Jodi's spell, according to my professors. And he wasn't allowed to see the kids, and he's in this cold and he's following protocol. I'm like, well, it makes sense to me. But then these other rate your professor students, I mean, they're saying he's abusive and they're filing battery charges themselves as students. Thoughts, Dr. John?
Yeah, these are public comments, and when he teaches, he's a public persona. It's mind-boggling that, I mean, I have to take these as true. I think for the most part. I mean, maybe some of them are angry students trying to discredit him, but let me reiterate some of the things these students are saying. One student said, he pulled me by the arm into his office to yell at me. Think about that. Like, I don't know, if so I've been an adjunct professor at UNLV for, I don't know, 20 years, 16, 17 years. I lost track. But if I pulled a student by the arm, and most of my students have been female, by the way, not, I've had males as well, but the majority, more than 50%, have been female. If I grabbed a female student by the arm and pulled her into my office and yelled at her for anything, I would be never, ever, ever considered again. I would never work again for UNLV in any capacity whatsoever. Like, I don't know. Right. Somebody said I don't know how does he get away with this? Right. I mean, so if you want to learn about who this guy is, the attorney paints him as a really nice guy. Maybe he is. Maybe these student comments are way off, but they're public. He's essentially engaging in potentially criminal behavior here. He's grabbing students. Here's this one. He screamed and yelled at us for using TikTok and went on a rant. He threw a textbook at me. Again, you can't just throw a textbook at a student. I mean, I don't know how he gets away. If this is accurate, I don't know. These, we haven't confirmed these, but it's troubling. It's very troubling. This comment about him being rude, not respecting the students, being in a bad mood, and making homophobic remarks and making his students feel, I mean, why is he working there? Is he still teaching at BYU? And what has BYU done about this? It's again, why are people looking the other way with the Frankies all the time? Is it influence? If any normal person, myself included, if any normal professor or person did any of those things, even remotely did any of those things, we would be fired.
And rightfully so.
And rightfully so. Right. Exactly. Like, but he apparently can do that without any concern whatsoever, without consequence, and it doesn't seem to matter. So I think if you take these comments seriously, you'd have to question who this guy is. And you'd have to question his character, and you'd have to question his involvement. Again, I always say, if somebody's willing to do something that abusive publicly, then they're probably going to do something worse behind closed doors. So if he's treating his students like this, how's he treating his kids? How's he treating Ruby? So I think there's a lot of concerns there. What's happening behind closed doors? And will we ever know the truth of that? I don't know, but it's troubling at the very least. It's very troubling.
It is. It is. So it's an interesting culture, in other words, to be continued when we delve into the Franke family culture.
Right. So what was Kevin's involvement? I don't know. But if you look at the student reviews, you'd certainly have to wonder what he's done behind closed doors at the very least.
Correct. 5,000 people here, babe.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, everyone.
We appreciate you
being here. Yeah, we appreciate it. And thank you for if you like this, thank you for giving it a thumbs up. All right. Elephant in the room time. Let's talk.
Yeah.
As much as you can. We understand you have your limits because you actually respect your profession. All right. So J.D. Wyatt shared a comment on our YouTube video last week's Hidden Hour that got 61 thumbs up. 61 people like this comment, J.D. Wyatt. In my humble opinion, they state, as an armchair psychologist, we love our armchair psychologists, I'm apt to believe much of Jodi's psychopathy is related to her being a closeted lesbian. I don't think that she would be able to properly heal until she admits this to herself and, more importantly, come out of the closet and make amends to all of the people she has abused. Someone responded to that. Can I read that now, or do you want me to read that later?
You can read it.
Okay. Emantos wrote in response to J.D. Wyatt, I thought this since day one, and I think it's been a driving force behind everything I've heard and continue to learn about her. I'm surprised it's not being addressed, as it's likely where her self-hatred stems from. I think it drives her punishing behavior towards others. I also think she was jealous of her niece and again projected self-hatred onto Jesse. And while Jodi clearly breached all sorts of ethical violations with Ruby, there is something else going on. Given their upbringing in a religion that does not approve of homosexuality, I think it's something worth looking into in this case, and yet no one seems to be talking about it. Oh, we're going to talk about it. We're talking about it.
Yeah, there's a reason our name is hidden, and that's because we talk about these types of things when no one else does. So,
correct.
I agree with their analyses. I think they're right on.
Well, Matos mentioned Jesse again. Yeah. The Mormon Stories interview, the compelling Mormon Stories interview with Jesse, and what Jesse stated. Can I play that now?
Yeah, please play that.
Let's play this. And this is why we're delving into this. There is some evidence for us enough to speculate. Let me pull this up.
I thought it's all speculation.
Yeah. Okay.
I've thought that since I was a kid.
That what?
That potentially she was queer.
Okay.
And I am queer. So I'm for it. I think it's great. It's real great. Waters are warm. And I have no idea. She did say something to me when I was living with her that was very strange, because I've known I was queer since I was like 7. And it was like experimenting with girls and friends since I was 7 or 8. And she knew about that, and it was very bad. It was very evil. But then she said something to me. She had this friend, her name's Bev. She said something to the effect of, yes, being gay is evil and, pleasures of the flesh and yada, yada. But if I were to have sexual relationships with my friends, if we were to it would be different because there's a deep emotional connection there, and that's different. And we were sitting in someone's living room and she said this, and I was just like, what? Yeah, that's called being gay. What do you think gay relationships are like? They are emotional and deep and connective, and yeah. So she did that. That is something that she said to me. I mean, other people were there. I don't know. I don't remember who was there. But that's the closest thing I've ever had where she admitted out loud.
Your mic. I think your mic's off.
There we go. So that's
Okay.
interesting.
Yep. So
And then let's go to one more thing. Let's see if I can share this. People have mentioned, by the way, also the video that John and I have also seen where Ruby is crying and Jodi does comfort her by rubbing her leg, her thigh. So there's that. People have mentioned that.
yeah, we can't show that.
Right.
We can't show that because of concerns with YouTube, but we would love to show that. But yes, for those of you who haven't seen that video, it's Ruby is getting very emotional and talking about why she left 8 passengers, and Jodi is placing her hand on her leg the entire time, right, trying to comfort her, basically.
Correct.
Trying to reassure her.
Right. So this is, to me, the most interesting piece of information. Those of you that have seen this already, which is Ruby Griffiths Franke stating on Facebook, making it Facebook official, as we all call it, that she is in a relationship with Jodi Hildebrandt in January of 2022. Some people have seen that and said, well, this is fake because Ruby actually has another Facebook profile, which indeed she does. But just so you know, while the other Ruby Facebook profile is the more official one where we even have some mutual friends, this Facebook profile is the one that is moderator for the Connections group. So it is an actual profile, not just simply a fake one. I don't know if Jodi made it or Ruby made it, but it was made in order for Ruby to be a moderator on the Connections Facebook page. So, in a world where we say, make your relationship Facebook official, it's intriguing. Again, we can't prove anything with certainty, but again, we feel now that there is enough speculation and enough evidence, or not speculation, there are enough questions and enough evidence to speculate. And so, John, with all this being laid out on the table, if Jodi Hildebrandt is queer, is gay, is a lesbian, what in the world? What does that mean for why is someone so homophobic? How does this play into her mentality? Please explain it to us, to me.
Well,
or does it play into her psychopathy?
Well, I haven't used the term psychopathy with her yet, by the way. So I guess you can say that, but I can't say that. I would. What Jesse said it, by the way.
Jesse said it. I was reciting what Jesse said.
Okay.
Jesse called her a psychopath.
Jesse said, right. Jesse believes that Jodi is a psychopath and mentioned that on the interview. Yeah. So
but you
I don't know. I don't know where that information came from, but
we hope to talk to Jesse ourselves. We have not yet.
So I think our, again, I love the fact that by the way, that our gems consider themselves to be armchair psychologists, because I really encourage that. Like that's part of what we want to do here, is we want to have these types of conversations about the psychological elements of crimes. And so I love it. A couple of people were critical of the armchair psychologist label. I'm like, yeah, I love it. Just, I don't care if you're a psychologist or not. Just go for it. Give us your thoughts. So I agree. I think this is a major component, and let's think about this for a second. So she talks about in her book, I guess this will bring us to her book a little bit, but I haven't read the whole thing, but I have read what I think are the autobiographical elements of her book. She, in her book, she starts with that she mentioned this in the video we played last week, but her father was in the Air Force. He was a military man. He flew fighter planes, and her mother was a stay-at-home mom. She basically says that her parents were without any emotions. The motto in the home was, "You're a Hildebrandt," quote, "You're a Hildebrandt, go hard or go home." And so that's interesting, in the sense that, for a couple reasons. Number one, go hard or go home. It kind of implies that love is conditional. That if you don't do well enough, or you're not successful enough, or if you don't try hard enough and you're not successful, then you're not loved. So go hard or go home. I guess that's nothing new. Perhaps many families have that type of motto. But the other thing that's interesting about the go hard or go home to me is, so I've heard the term go big or go home, but in the Hildebrandt family, it's go hard. So that's interesting to me. That's interesting because hard implies something very masculine. Hard implies, this is kind of where I think the influence of Jodi's father comes in, who's the Air Force colonel. That the goal here is not to show emotions, it's to be hard. It's to harden yourself. It's to be kind of, I don't know, masculine and shut down, and right. And so I think there's an element here where this family probably, and this is also based on her descriptions of her mother. Her mother seemed to play more of a side role or a secondary role to the father, who's a colonel in the Air Force. She really didn't have a voice. So Jodi says that. Let's see if I can find the quote here. Jodi says, I don't know if I'm going to find this quote. I should have. My mother, though many people, she's talking about her mother here. Her mother lost a 4-month-old son, and it devastated her. And she says, though many people around her were interested in her grief and pain, she, her mother, was not willing to disclose the devastation she felt. That tragedy, along with many other painful experiences in my mother's life, resulted in her choosing a controlled and controlling exterior, which appeared to serve her well. Unfortunately, I was never able to really know her as a woman or mother, and we both missed out on the connection. So she's basically saying her mother, she doesn't get into details, but she's essentially saying that her mother was so filled with grief, apparently, that she completely shut down. She was unavailable. She apparently still carried on with her maternal role in the family. But I think one takeaway from that to me is this does seem to be a patriarchy of sorts. Obviously, the father's in charge. The mother is sort of in the typical feminine role. And I'd have to think that there's some sexism in this family. That coupled with the fact that, so what I mean by that is that women in the family are not seen as important or privileged as men. And to use Jodi's terms, I guess, I think in some ways women in this family are not enough. Maybe they're not enough. I don't know. But when you couple that when you couple this kind of sexist attitude in the family with the fact that women in the church, which was a huge part of this family's culture, the women in the church don't have power. They don't have the priesthood, right? Women in the church.
We have there are very different roles in the LDS Mormon religion when it comes to the role males and females play in the home.
So I think when you put those together, you're starting to build some resentment. I think you have someone, Jodi, obviously she's female. She's seen the limitations of the power she might have. She's seen how her father treats the mother, how the father treats women, right? And how the mother is really, in some ways, very isolated in this family. She sees that. Jodi will later say in her book that most of her childhood was spent alone. So it's interesting that her mother was isolated, and she was too. So here's what she says. This is on page 6. She says, most of my childhood days I spent alone, playing by myself and roaming my desert playground. I could usually be found interacting with the goats in their pen, milking them and riding them. I liked being alone, and I felt safe with my animals. I did not have much adult supervision as my father worked full-time and my mother appeared overwhelmed with many tasks and duties. So that's interesting that the mother in many ways is isolated, and so is Jodi. She has no friends. She spends most of her time with the goats. That's never a good sign, by the way, for somebody who's going to start a company later called Connections, to have a childhood where you're lonely and isolated. And let me say too, there's something in reading this, there's something sad here too. I did have some empathy here for Jodi.
Yeah, I felt really sad for her childhood. Very sad for her.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But so you have this intrinsic sexism in this family. It's a patriarchal family structure, and then you bring in this other component, let's call it the homophobic component, where I think clearly this probably comes from the father, but there is this element of homophobia and this view, I think, that God does not condone homosexuality, that this is seen in this family. This is seen as a threat. It's seen as evil. Jodi uses that term all the time. And right, and we learned that from Jesse as well, that Jodi would call Jesse evil all the time for her sexual orientation. So you have this sexism and this homophobia in this family, and then you have this daughter who is both female and I presume at some point is starting to have potentially, and again, we can't confirm. The only way we can confirm that Jodi is a lesbian would be if she acknowledges it, right? Like that's really the only way we'd totally confirm that, unless she's disclosed it to someone like Ruby, and Ruby's not talking about it. So you have these two elements, and clearly this is a family that is not going to support these types of homosexual impulses that Jodi is probably experiencing. So figure around like 10-ish, maybe 10 to 12, somewhere in there, like pre-pubescent to puberty. That's probably when she's starting to kind of notice this. And, it's important to recognize that children, they learn how their parents perceive them, right? Children are very interested, or at least reflective children are very interested in kind of knowing how their parents see them and what their identities would do, what their behaviors would do, or how that would affect their parents. And so I think Jodi is well aware that if she acknowledges those sexual impulses that she's experiencing, that she's going to risk rejection and she's going to risk humiliation in this family. So I think her best option, given that to her, is to deny it. Her best option is to repress and deny any, homosexual fantasies and impulses and desires she's having. And I would say that would be the basis of a lot of her psychological conflicts and her neuroses. And so what you have, what we call that would be called internalized homophobia. That she's experiencing these negative feelings and denials around her sexual orientation potentially, which often leads to self-hatred. So you have someone who can't really be what they want to be. They can't express those, let's call them deeper desires, or they can't express really who they are fully. And I think, the response to that is to just repress it. It's just to push it away and to push it down, which, by the way, on that issue, and this is truly sad and tragic, Jodi discloses in her book that she was sexually abused by adolescent boys between the ages of 2 and 5. And then again, when she was older, between the ages of 7 and 9. And the way she dealt with it is she's quite open about this. The way she dealt with it is she said she just forgot. So here's what she says in her book. So she's talking about the second instance of abuse. She said, "How does a child of 9 years of age move forward with those filthy images in her mind? Question mark. How can she how can she, naive to the evils around her, reconcile those events? Question mark. Easy. She forgets. And that's what I did. That was my brilliant way of living out the remainder of my childhood years." So she's acknowledging quite openly that she represses the trauma, and that's precisely what she's doing with her sexual impulses. She's repressing them so that she doesn't have to deal with them. And so, as our astute armchair psychologist listeners pointed out, the consequence of that type of repression and internalized homophobia is projection. Projection in the sense, so what's projection? Projection is when we deny our unwanted thoughts, feelings, and attributes, and we place them or ascribe them on other people. So what's going on here is, I think, that if indeed Jodi is gay, that what's going on here is that she's projecting onto other people all of her self-hatred, and that she's feeling it herself. And so one component of that that's really important to recognize is what Jodi said to Jesse, which is she tells Jesse, well, you may be gay, but if I, and that's evil. But if I was gay, I would have deep connections in my relationships. So therefore, that would be okay. That would be acceptable, right? So, so the takeaway from that is that what Jodi's saying with that comment to Jesse is that she's dehumanizing. She's dehumanizing that entire population. She's dehumanizing any, the LGBTQ plus community. She's dehumanizing anything that has to do with sexual impulses that aren't perceived to be normal. And so there's a real element here of dehumanization, in the sense that when you take the self-hatred and you project it on other people, which is precisely what she did with Jesse, by the way, that you're approaching this from the perspective that somehow you're better, that somehow you're superior, that people that are gay are inferior, and you're able to do that because you're able to dehumanize that group of people. And she showed that so clearly with Jesse by saying, well, you're gay and that's evil. You're a lesbian, that's evil. But if I were to do that, I would have deep connections. And that would make it okay for me because I would humanize it. But you gay people over there, you don't humanize it enough. You don't connect with people, so it's not okay. You just have shallow gay relationships, so that's not okay. But me, I'm more humane about it. That's okay, right? So, but the whole thing is really a version of dehumanization. And so that's how you land. I think that's why this issue is so critical, as our astute listeners, as our armchair psychologist pointed out. That's why it's such a critical issue, because you've got this unresolved rage, you've got this unresolved anger with Jodi, and you can kind of see that. When she was speaking at the Eternal Court Conference, a lot of people said she's so aggressive. She dominates the stage, right? You can feel that aggression. You can see that aggression. She comes across as angry and aggressive, and that is why this issue is so critical, as some of our listeners pointed out, because in a perfect world, somebody like Jodi, if she wants to live in the truth that she's so fond of talking about, if she wants to live without distortion, she should start with acknowledging her own sexual impulses, honest about them, and not repressing them, and not resisting them, and therefore starting down this path of who she really is. And she should live that truth openly. But she can't, obviously, because she's invested. Her whole system of thought is about God and God's truth. And in her mind's eye, and this is controversial because Christians vary on this, but in her mind's eye, God does not condone homosexuality. So therefore, it's evil. And whoever has those types of sexual impulses is evil. And she is not going to fit in that category. So she'll never acknowledge it.
She'll never acknowledge it. And so, and then I just want to say the irony that she is a therapist and she could never get there. No, I mean, she did have a hard childhood, and no matter all the work she did, she refused. I honestly think that this is where her entire therapy model comes from, is she could never go all the way to accepting herself. She created a system where she never had to tell her entire truth.
There's some moments in this book that are really telling, and I want to point some of those out. So she talks about, this is on page 7. She talks about what it would be like if she ever felt good enough, and which is ironic because the title of her book is about feeling good enough, but she says, in the end, it never panned out and I never was good enough. So she's contradicting the very thing she's trying to promote. She says, every choice I made, every feeling I felt, every precept I had, all went through this portal of self-hatred and condemnation. So she's telling us that throughout her whole entire childhood, until she comes up with her therapeutic system, she feels nothing but self-hatred and condemnation. So she's acknowledging her self-hatred.
Okay, yeah.
But this is the most interesting part. So when she goes on her therapeutic journey, so she says she represses her abuse for many years, and then she goes to see a therapist. And the therapist knows that she's trying to hold back what she's really feeling, and she's not telling him the truth, and he pushes her. And she starts recalling some of her past abuse. And when she's doing that, she says, while I spent the first 2.5 hours, this is with her therapist, attempting to manipulate, control, and distract him, he was perceptive and did not allow me to duck and dodge his questions. The last 30 minutes, my invisible shield cracked, and I was left with horrid memories, smells, images, and sounds of interactions with one of my perpetrators. So she was forced to acknowledge her trauma with the therapist one time. And I think that moment was really traumatic for her. So maybe the therapist pushed a little too hard. I don't know. But it's interesting that she's also telling us how she deals with unpleasant things. She's telling us that she's trying to, this is her word. These are her terms. She tried to manipulate, control, and distract the therapist so that she didn't have to feel those things. And you might say, well, that's a common strategy of clients in therapy. Yes, it is. But I think what's interesting here is not just this moment with this therapist, but the aftermath. So from what I can tell, she doesn't return to this therapist, and she tries to go on and get help from other people. And here's what she says. This is really important. She says, this is page 9 from her book. She says, quote, during my journey to healing, I was not the traditional patient. I was curious and somewhat suspicious of the professionals I worked with. This part I'm going to read slowly because it's so important. I resisted their attempts to diagnose my behavior, knowing intuitively that these labels were not components to my healing. As I participated in their interventions, I was inadvertently enabled to stay sick. So what she's saying essentially is that her healing journey with therapists failed. And she's telling us why it failed.
Right.
It failed because she was suspicious of therapists, so she didn't trust them, which, by the way, she says one of her dad's main messages in her family was, don't trust anyone. So clearly, she was a loner in childhood. She didn't trust anyone. She didn't trust her therapists. And she said she resisted their interventions, meaning she approached therapy without an open mind. Any therapist will tell you that the only way you're going to change is if you approach therapy or anything for that matter with an open mind. Otherwise, you're not going to learn. So she shut it down. She wasn't willing to get help. She wasn't a patient that was willing to change. I'm not totally blaming her. Maybe she wasn't ready for it, but it's the next step that really matters. And that next step is, here's what she says. This is page 10. After years of bumbling around and pretending to be in control, I went to God to find the answers. She says, for 20 years, I've been asking heaven for answers on behalf of myself and all those I work with. I've spent tens of thousands of hours asking, studying, listening, and praying to see clearly how to apply principles of truth to human suffering and pain. So what she's learned, so therapy fails because she doesn't want it to succeed, because she is essentially stonewalling the therapeutic process. So she spends time praying and she spends time alone looking for the answers. And that's when she gets the inspiration from God to come up with this system. So I think it's really important to see the way that religion and God influences her thought process. So in some ways, it makes more sense to me after reading her book to see why she's rejecting traditional notions of therapy, which rely more on the patient and the patient's worldview, and she turns to God for the answers. Because I think what you see with Jodi's system is that you can only heal through God. And so if you try traditional therapy, which is ironic, I guess, because she probably sells herself as more of a traditional therapist in some ways, but she's not getting help from therapists. She's getting help from heaven and God and from the other dimension, right? And again, that's Chad Daybell-esque in the sense that Chad Daybell doesn't see any real meaningful interaction with human beings on this planet. It's only when you get to the New Jerusalem that things become meaningful and that you can find the truth. And so you have a little bit of you have kind of a therapeutic version of that. So, on the one hand, I have a lot of empathy for Jodi Hildebrandt in the sense that this is someone who grew up in a very difficult family with no emotions, no empathy. They seemed like a very strict religious family. They seem like they might have had some extreme beliefs in some ways. She doesn't talk about that, but I can make that assumption. And then she was sexually abused because there wasn't a lot of supervision in her home. She was sexually abused, according to her, twice at a very young age, and that must have been extremely painful to her. And I'm sure that alone would have created a lot of rage. So in addition to this childhood home where clearly as a female she felt less than, and as someone who was probably, maybe, I don't know how young she was, but experiencing some sexual impulses that were forbidden and that she couldn't express, and then she's sexually abused on top of that. I mean, that's a tough situation to be in. And so I feel empathy for her in the sense that what she went through was hard and it was horrendous, and there must have been a lot of suffering and a lot of pain. So I feel empathy for that. The way she handled it, I probably not so much. I don't have as much.
I have no empathy for her as
Right.
an adult, and the way she handled it, I have zero empathy. But I do have empathy for the child she was. I will always feel empathy for a child and what a child goes through. No child should have to go through the type
Right.
of things children go through. I have no empathy for her right now, just being honest. Zero.
Well,
But
I
I
think
can see those two things separately for me.
I think where the train goes off the rails is when she's seeking help and she's just not open to it. I think at that point she knows that working with therapists, at least, so working with therapists that don't necessarily bring religion or God into their work. There are some Christian therapists who promote themselves as such, but most therapists are trained to be more humanistic, to approach things from, a client-centered perspective and not to bring in God. And so, like, for me personally, if I do clinical work and not forensic work, I would never bring God into anything unless the client thought it was important or the client brings it in. So most therapists are trained to work within the client's worldview and their perceptions of things, and that's typically how it's done. But I think Jodi was not content to go down that path. I think Jodi really wanted to be special. She thought she was creating something unique. In fact, she says, we talked about this a little last week, she says her work is, quote, "It is a new paradigm of thought that when learned, practiced, and applied will heal all emotional, mental, and spiritual illness. It heals disconnection, sadness, anxiety, traumas, fears, addictions, entitlements, conflicts, resentments, and individual and relationship pain of all types. Truth heals. This is a promise from God." This is really in the book. She says that. So she's essentially saying that her approach to treatment is a panacea for all mental health ailments. She's arguing that. That's a big I think any therapist would say that's a massive claim right there, but she believes it.
Right.
And of course, I just noticed a comment. Yeah, of course, she profited hugely from this.
She did.
She made a ton of money from this. And
She did.
And again, most therapists don't get into this field for money. Most of us truly are invested in helping others, and helping others is not an endeavor that makes one rich. So it is peculiar that I think one of her goals certainly was fame and fortune.
Agree. Kathleen, thank you for your comment. A lot of people are implying we're saying things. Jodi is gay, and that's okay.
Yeah.
The problem is she doesn't think it's okay.
Right. Exactly.
That's the issue we're discussing.
Right. Right. Exactly.
The problem is not her sexuality. The problem is how she handles it.
Exactly. I'm not making a judgment about her sexual orientation at all. I'm making a judgment about her perception of it and her repression of it and her seemingly unwillingness to acknowledge it. It's the avoidance here that's the problem. Being gay is fine.
Yeah.
In fact, I think if she was willing to challenge her family a little bit and come out of the closet and acknowledge her sexual orientation early on, you might not be where this might not have happened. So it's right. And it's like so many things. It's not, the problem isn't her sexual orientation. The problem is her inability or her unwillingness to acknowledge it. It's her avoidance of it, her denial of it.
Correct. It's just one piece. I think we have some new listeners tonight. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being part of our channel. With that, you might not understand how we always do things here. We delve into the hidden motives, and many people are suggesting by assessing her or trying to see her as a whole person with experiences in her past, we might be helping her or excusing her. John assesses criminals. My wonderful husband here, he assesses criminals for a living. And it is so important to discuss them because there are two parts. We have to work to understand victims, but we also have to work to understand criminals, because without that understanding, these crimes are committed again and again. So in order to help stop crimes from happening, or to see the red flags, or to see the warning signs, or to become better as humans in this world and understanding people, we discuss the criminals and try to understand what might have created them. So for those new to hidden true crime, that is what we do here while we support the victims. And many of our victims thank us for our work in helping understand what happened to them and how something could be possible. And as Stacy said a couple of comments ago, she is not gay.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
Is she not her best self? I don't know. I need to ponder that one.
She's just not her best self, or she's not her best self. Three knots. Figure that one out.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, people are bringing up Lindsay Clancy, and I don't even know if I shared this with you, John, but Lindsay Clancy was indicted. This is the mother. I have little ears in the room, so this is a mother that did something horrendous. Another mother. John and I do have episodes about Lindsay Clancy. I can't recall if we did 2 or 3, but please find those on our YouTube channel. Hidden True Crime, Lindsay Clancy, and Stephanie Budge. Thanks for posting those here. Yeah. Thank you for helping us to understand that. Thank you. Thank you for talking about the elephant in the room. Now, for those that say nobody's talking about this, send them to Hidden True Crime. Time code this. Right. We talked about it.
Right. I'm sure, sometimes talking about the elephant in the room isn't popular. So I'm sure we're going to, I'm sure we're going to get a little pushback, but hey, that's why we're here. So
yes.
Jodi has her version of the truth. I guess we have our version of the truth. So, I mean, her version of the truth obviously is more compelling, but hers is truth with a capital T. Ours is with a very small t.
Oh, that's another fascinating. She actually defines those two things in her book, by the way. She's like truth with a capital T, truth with a lower case t. She also has something, she's very anti-opinions. Only truth, no opinions. Opinions don't count. I'm like, but I have an opinion. Well, just shut up then, according to Jodi. Shut those opinions down. The truth, I have it.
Right. I'm so glad, by the way. So I don't even know what to do with that. I think for a lot of philosophers, they would argue that it's opinions all the way down. So, but with maybe some modicum of truth here and there, but not with a capital T. So. Yeah. I think it's a big claim in the sense that she's really arguing that she's the one with access to the truth.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it
Baker. She's also not in jail now.
I know.
For those that came late, we're making fun of her book. Her book. She is not. Hold that book up. Do you have it there?
Oh yeah. I think there should be some type of jingle that for her connections group or something about the. You are not
enough.
You are not enough. And then the subtitle is enoughness. Enoughness is the lie that keeps you from the truth, all caps, of who you are. That's the subtitle. I mean, you know, people get mad at mental health professionals for all this psychobabble, but I mean, this is not helping. This is not going to help if people think that we use too much psychobabble, this is just certainly, this is going to be the cherry on top of the whipped cream.
Also, did she use that speak with children? I mean, it just is like, what if we told her you can't play with your tablet? You'd be like,
yeah, I know, right? And I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Steph, thank you. Please show your support for Hidden True Crime. For those that are new here, it would mean so much to us if you would consider subscribing, if we could earn your subscribing. Thank you to those, and thank you to those that hit the like button, because we do feel this discussion is important, and the like button doesn't just help our channel, but it helps this specific video to get out there so people can see this, and hopefully we can help. So thank you. Faye, watch our stuff. We talk about it, and go over to Mormon Stories. We promote them. So yeah, we're good. Okay. Yeah. We don't block a lot of people, but sometimes I do. Okay.
So, do you have anything else? I have something I want to end with. I think we're probably a little over, but
yeah, please. I'm good. Well, can I share a couple announcements and then end? I love it. I love the way you end with a profound message. Let me share a couple things really quickly, or one thing.
Okay.
I'm going to be at CrimeCon next weekend. So our next Hidden Hour, I will be at CrimeCon. Hope to see some of you there in Orlando. If you see me, come say hi. I will be working there. I have plans to do a lot of work while I'm at CrimeCon. But I will be trying to do a lot of lives as well and sharing things. They're going to be spontaneous on the phone. So again, hit subscribe. But if you don't want to miss those lives next week, hit the notification button. I don't know if we're going to be live for Saturday night, but we might Friday, to be determined. So also hit notifications, because I'm not quite sure when John and I will be able to go live. I will have something Saturday night in Orlando, but please, if you see us there, come say hello. Go ahead, Babe.
Somebody had a question. So apparently there's another book called You Are Not Enough by, I don't know, Beth somebody, Stuckey, I think. I just saw it. And so somebody was asking when this book came out. It came out in 2019. So I don't know when the other book came out, but I do want to say this, that I'm gonna read the first line. I think this is important, so that's why I'm gonna back up and talk about this. But this is the first line from Jodi's book. She says, quote, "The greatest lie that has ever been told is this: you are not enough." When I read that, I mean, this is the very first sentence of her book, page 1. First sentence. When I read that, I thought, that's Brené Brown, dude. She's totally ripping off Brené Brown. Brené Brown's whole thing is shame.
She is.
Brené Brown's whole message is that you often feel like you're not enough because of shame, which, by the way, again, getting back to Jessie says that her whole message during the period when Brené Brown was starting to write about shame was about shame. So to me, that's another person that she borrowed from. I don't know if that's the right, that she borrowed material from Brené Brown. This whole idea of not being enough is really a very popular idea that was popularized by Brené Brown. And so when Jodi thinks here that she's coming up with a new paradigm, I think she should really start crediting some people and start recognizing that this stuff didn't come out of nowhere, that she's taking these ideas from cognitive behavioral therapy, from Brené Brown, from reality therapy, from existential therapy. She's taking them from all over the place. She's taking them from the 12-step programs, that one of the basis of their, I talked about this last week, but I just want to make it clear, this is not new stuff. The only thing that makes this new is that she tries to tie this in to God as the source of truth. And I think that's part of the issue. But so anyway, enough about that. I'm going to end with, so I need an antidote. I need an antidote to this book. You are not, I can't even say it anymore. It's like become a tongue twister. You are not enough.
Someone, a songwriter. I'm sure we have a gem that's a songwriter. Oh, The Lies We Tell Ourselves.
This is a book by John Fredrickson. John Fredrickson is someone I really have a lot of respect for. He's great. And so if you want an antidote to this whole idea of distortion and not being enough, and John Fredrickson would be the book to read. The Lies We Tell Ourselves. I think this is a book we're probably going to read in our book club fairly soon. So, but I'm just gonna. I don't have time to get into this book too much, but I just want to read a little bit of the end of this book to counter some of Jodi's ideas. This is from Fredrickson, page 156. We can imprison people in their histories and in our demands. If we are fortunate, differences with others will rouse us. Opening our eyes, we discern others little by little and attempt to know them completely. Given the choice of embracing people or our ideas about them, we must always choose people. Then our thinking will expand to accommodate what is. Are we knowable? No, but we are embraceable. This is what we live in, the embrace. I love that because that's the complete opposite of what Jodi is saying. He's saying that we're not knowable, that if we try to understand and judge other people based on our ideas of them and not by actually seeing them and looking at them and trying to understand who they are, no matter what their race or sexual orientation or beliefs, if we don't try to really see people, and this is the problem with Jodi's system of thought, is that it's based on ideas. Her distortion is the distortion of her ideology. And so she's not able to see the people. The irony is that she's trying to promote this idea of connection, but in many ways she's disconnected because she's not, as Fredrickson, she said, given the choice of embracing people or our ideas about them, we must always choose people. So I think that the problem with therapeutic approaches that are more theoretical and more idea-based like Jodi's are that you're really losing track of the person sitting in front of you, and you're not really listening. You're not paying attention to that person. And I love this idea that, Fredrickson says, we're not really totally knowable, but that doesn't mean I can't embrace someone. That doesn't mean that in my confusion and in my mystery and in my unknowingness that someone can't embrace me or I can't embrace someone else. And that's truly the opposite of the Jodi Hildebrandt idea. And I think I appreciate Fredrickson's approach to therapy. And I think that's more consistent with how I see effective treatment. And it's unfortunate that Jodi didn't stay with it and really tried to open herself up to change and to healing at some point.
Thank you, babe. Thank you. As Janine says, Dr. John always leaves us with something profound. And he does, and it's true. And thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Janelle Murphy, I love Dr. John's parting words. They are always so meaningful and heartfelt. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, guys. Yep, I'm going to miss you at CrimeCon, but I will be here holding on the fort with our little guy and taking him to school and feeding him and hopefully I'll be better by then.
In other words, we won't abandon him to go to Crime Con.
Well, we're a little low on duct
Bad joke.
tape.
Too soon.
We're a little low on duct tape, so
Okay. We'll stop there. Sorry, bad
yeah,
jokes.
let's
Sometimes
stop.
we have
let's
to
stop when we're
diffuse
ahead.
things with humor.
Let's stop when we're ahead.
Sometimes we do that here.
Yeah, sorry.
No, don't apologize. I'll get some duct tape. We're low.
No, please.
All right.
don't.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Have a good night. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks, guys.
for subscribing and thank you for being here and so much for your support. We'll
All
see you soon, and I'll see you next week at CrimeCon.
All right. Take care, guys.
There at CrimeCon and on YouTube. We'll see you.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye.